Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and this is Dream Fights. This is where we pit two superstars from different eras against each other and see how they stack up and who we think would win. So I'm joined as always as Grant Tassie Brown, Peter Maniatis and Mike Altamura. How are we guys?
All good, all good.
Well,
living
last
the
week,
dream, Lyndon, living the dream, mate.
I bet you are, mate. I bet you're talking the Dream Fights. Look, the last week's fight, I must say, created a lot of feedback. It was the Oscar De La Hoya and Costa Tszyu fight. I think from memory, 3 out of 4 of us went for Oscar in very close circumstances. We actually did a poll on our Instagram page after the fight, and surprisingly, 59% picked Costa Tszyu to beat Oscar De La Hoya. So there you go. So we don't know anything, guys. And I must say, we love Costa, and I think the great thing about that fight, Peter, because you obviously picked it, was I think Mike, you had Oscar as definitive. I think Pete and I were both on the fence. Tassie was always going to go for Team Tszyu, and that's fine. But it was a tough fight, but it did provide a lot of feedback.
Privyet, my friend, privyet.
Okay. All right, well, this week, Tassie, we're up to you, mate. So you're going to step up and pick the fight. Who have we got?
Hitman Thomas Hearns versus Floyd Money Mayweather at welterweight.
At welterweight.
At welterweight, at the division where Floyd is probably most known as. The fights with Pacquiao and Hatton and Broner and all that. I mean, not Broner, but Pacquiao, Hatton, all the guys he fought there. Mosley and the Hitman Hearns, he undefeated, fought Ray Leonard for the undisputed title. So I'll see how they match up at welterweight.
Yeah, he was just Pete, wasn't he? He was just devastating at welterweight. And is it just me? But I know they're both welterweights, but Hearns just if you look at him, just seems that much bigger of a man. But obviously they fought at the same weight. He was just a monster, wasn't he, Thomas Hearns?
Hearns was 6'1", and Floyd's 5'8". And you look, Floyd started at 130. He started as junior lightweight. The depth with boxing, the worst thing we could do is sound like old people, where they were so much tougher, they were so much braver in there. Today's fighters aren't the same. I don't want to go down that path, but Hearns was like a massive welterweight, and Floyd, he wasn't everyone's seen Floyd. Floyd he probably could have stayed at lightweight in the old days and campaigned there and comfortably kept making lightweight. Same with Pacquiao. But they moved up because the depth wasn't there. You can move up and still dominate. But if you had to move up and fight a Thomas Hearns and you had to jump a few divisions, the danger signs come up quickly. And
Mike, it's amazing, isn't it, with this fight? Obviously, this fight's at welterweight, but you've got, like Pete said, you've got a Mayweather that's 5'8" coming up from 130 who stopped at. He did have a fight at 1 or 2 fights at super welterweight, but it was mainly a welterweight to finish the career. Then you've got someone like Hearns who started at welterweight and went right up to cruiserweight at the end of it. So there's this massive disparity in weight, isn't there, and size.
Yeah, I would say that Hearns probably naturally is at least 2 weight classes bigger. But another thing to keep in mind, Tommy, for the entirety of his welterweight career, fought in an era where you had same-day weigh-ins. So some of the disadvantages that Floyd would have encountered with other fighters rehydrating 10, 15 pounds bigger than him wouldn't have necessarily happened with Hearns, given that basically you've got 9 hours, 10 hours from weigh-in to fight. So that's another consideration as well. But yeah, stylistically, you think of them as 3-4 weight classes apart. But it's truthfully, Hearns peaked at welterweight, and Mayweather, his peak fights in his career were welterweight too.
Well, let's take a look at both fighters, and we'll start with Floyd Mayweather. So you can see here, Floyd Money Mayweather, 50-0, 27 KOs. Look at all those titles there, all the way from super featherweight up to super welterweight. And no doubt he'll be a Hall of Fame inductee when he's eligible. You can see some highlights here of Money, and geez, right from the word go, I think back here was Pretty Boy Floyd, but you saw him at the '96 Olympics, Tassie, and I remember seeing him there live thinking, who is this guy? But geez, he didn't take him long to make an impression, did it?
Oh, no, look, I mean, he was always destined to be world champion. The first guy he beat was amazing, Gennaro Hernandez. I mean, that was a really tough first world title fight. I mean, then his most impressive win of that weight was obviously, Corrales, beating the undefeated Diego Corrales, who was a big man himself, in build for that weight. He destroyed him, knocked him down, I don't know, 6, 7 times. Then went up in weight, obviously, to lightweight. The tough fights for Castillo. First one was a bit, dubious, controversial, but he come back and made it right the next time, and then he just kept moving up. He beat Gaddy at super lightweight, and then and then obviously he was there for a little bit, and then up to welterweight he went, and up to light middle he dethroned De La Hoya, which was his coming out party that made him a celebrity and a beyond boxing. He was become famous with the 24/7 and all that was around the De La Hoya Mayweather time. Yeah,
it did, and Pete, he just made so many fighters look ordinary, didn't he? I know. Just you look at the fighters in this video there, and Madonna and Alvarez and De La Hoya and Marquez, and it didn't matter who. I mean, the list just goes on and on. He just made a lot of great fighters look pretty ordinary.
He was smart, and he did the basics so well, and he had a good boxing IQ, and defensively he was a genius. He just knew where everything was placed, and the shoulder roll and everything that he'd done it so well. He'd tie people up if he ever got hurt. He knew what to do, when what to do. He'd flurry when he needed to flurry to steal around. He was just a perfect consume boxing person. And also, he knew everything about the fighters. He'd studied fighters. He was one of those guys that just wasn't a fighter. He'd look at other fighters and he'd quickly have a game plan how to beat that guy. And he knew when to fight the guy at the right time to beat them as well. And that takes an art as well. He knew when to pick a guy. How do you know Floyd's going to win? When he picks you to fight him. That's when you know he's going to win, because he's that good at picking a guy at the right time.
Yeah. And Mike, which one was better, Money Mayweather or Pretty Boy Floyd?
Pretty Boy Floyd. I think Money Mayweather had to make some adjustments out of necessity. He didn't take as many chances. Was a little bit more defensive minded, needed to set traps to beat bigger fighters, whereas Pretty Boy Floyd was all action. He was still a great defensive fighter, but the mindset was more based on walking guys down and taking them out with combination and volume punching, whereas later in his career he made the necessary adjustments to be somewhat of a safety first fighter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think just watching even the videos here on there, he did become a different type of fighter. When he was Pretty Boy, he would actually take the fight on and walk these guys down and really overwhelm them with his talent. But later on, obviously because he's fighting bigger men as well, I suppose, but he really made those adjustments where he was a more cautious fighter and really, you can see there the difference there, but just really picked his punches and really just did enough to win on points pretty much every single time, didn't he? So a bit of a contrast to his opponent, and we'll look at him now, which is Thomas, we'll call him the Motor City Cobra because that's what he was when he was a welterweight. He became the hitman later, 61-5-1 with 48 KOs. You can see there world titles from welterweight right up to light heavyweight. 1980 and 1984 Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year. Voted Ring Magazine greatest super welterweight of all time. And in 2012 was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Now, before I get to you, Tassie, I'll tell you a quick little story about this. You talked about the 2012 Hall of Fame inductee. I actually was in America for, I think it was Pacquiao and Bradley, I think the first fight, and I was at the airport on the way home and waiting in line for my Hungry Jacks at the airport, and who do you think was about 3 people in front of me? It was Thomas Hitman Hearns waiting in line for a Whopper. And he'd actually just been at the induction and was on his way home, and I happened to walk up to him and say, "Hey Thomas, I really don't want to, cause any, or bring any attention to you. Would you mind if I get a photo?" And mind you, in this time, the whole restaurant's obviously turned to look at us, and I remember him saying, "Well, you didn't want to give me attention. You've done exactly that now." I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was good though. He took a photo, and And but yeah, I just thought of all the places where you'd find Thomas Hitman Hearns. It was in line at the Burger King at LAX. So Tassie, enough of that.
That's
Tassie,
awesome.
mate, he's obviously one of your favourite fighters. You obviously picked him in this fight for a reason.
Yeah, mate, I just think he was just genetically he was built like a freak. And I mean, he won his first 17 fights by knockout. He was 6'1". His reach was 78 inches, 78 centimetres compared to Floyd's, which is 5'8", 173. His reach. So I mean, he beat Jose Cuevas for his first world title. He went on to attempt to unify against Sugar Ray Leonard. Well, Sugar Ray Leonard is one of the greatest of all time, as we know, and he had Leonard gone, and then Leonard come back, and then he went on the back foot and boxed, and had Leonard gone again. Leonard come back and stopped him, but that was no disgrace losing in that fight. Then he went up and beat the great Wilfred Benitez at light middleweight, on points. He knocked him down. He's a Hall of Famer, 3-division champion, Benitez. Then he went on to knock out Roberto Duran cold in 2 rounds, which no
Only one
one
ever
does.
to do it. Yep.
Knocked him cold, mate. I mean, that's just next level in itself. Then he goes up to middleweight and attempts to fight the great Marvin Hagler, which we saw last week. No respect lost there. He went to war with Hagler. Amazing. Then he goes up and beats Dennis Andres, light heavyweight title. Then he goes back down and beats Joanne Roldan, who's a very good fighter, who give Hagler a hard fight at middleweight for the title. Later on, he goes up and beats the great Virgil Hill, undefeated, for the light heavyweight title as well, who was a great fighter.
And Andrews too, didn't he?
He was just... The thing about Tommy, and I'll get to you later about why I think he, in my opinion, beats Floyd. He's a great body puncher for a tall guy. Great body shots. His left jab was on point. His right hand, we all know about his right hand, but the guy could box and obviously go forward and put it on you. I mean, if he hurts you, get you out of there. Just an amazing fighter, mate. And I think styles make fights. And what I'll say, not now, but a bit later, stylistically, is all wrong for Floyd.
Yeah, no, fair enough too, mate. Pete, Jizzy, he had some devastating knockouts along the way, didn't he, at that weight?
He did, and look, if you see the build on Tommy Hearns, it's perfect. If you had to have a fighter's build, it was him. He had the long arms, long legs, broad shoulders, paper thin. So you can build on that physique. He's got an athlete's physique, and they're the type of guys that cause so much damage. Look at how long his arms are and how long his legs are. He's just got that perfect build. I mean, at 6'1" to fit that body into 66 kilo and to have that much power, it's unbelievable. And he had speed. He could box. He had everything you wanted in a fighter. I mean, he was a sparring partner, Pierre Caram, as well. They were very close friends. So Pierre maybe would have sparred 200 rounds with him. And I mean, this guy was... He was my favourite fighter growing up. So everyone loved Tommy Hearns. He was an excitement machine. He had X factor. He can do a lot of things. He could box, he could punch, and he could take you out with one punch as well, either hand. So,
Mike, do you think his legacy? I know everyone regards him as a great fighter. Obviously, Tassie had him in his top 10 of all time. Do you think he doesn't maybe get quite as enough recognition as he does because of the losses to Leonard and Hagler along the way?
Yeah, he never had one of those moments. I think if the decision went to him against Leonard in '89, like it probably should,
which he deserved,
then I think that probably alters his legacy a bit. But also the 2 losses to Iron Barkley, I think that dents his legacy a bit. It shouldn't as much because he should be judged by the prime and the best wins. And Hearns could be a little bit erratic, but really, to me, his prime was probably 1979 to about 84, thereabouts, 83, 84. So if you look at that era, he's just a phenomenal fighter. I think that sometimes amongst the fabulous 4, Hagler gets his credit because he was the dominant middleweight champ. Leonard gets his credit because he's the only one that beat the other three. And then Duran was greatest lightweight of all time, so he gets his credit. And sometimes Hearns gets a little bit forgotten. His greatness gets a little bit forgotten amongst those guys. He gets remembered as maybe the most entertaining to watch stylistically, but people forget actually how technically gifted and skilled a boxer he was.
And people obviously don't remember also that after 13 rounds against Sugar Ray Leonard, he pretty much had him on toast, didn't he? And obviously got stopped. Well, actually, I think the 13th he might have got rocked, but he got stopped in the 14th. But I don't realise how close he got to beating Leonard in his prime, and then obviously he got robbed in '89, which is a bit sad. I mean, not that it would have probably washed away all the disappointment, the legacy of that first Leonard fight, but at least it would have given him a bit of peace of mind going forward. But just a great fighter. So all right, well, moment of truth, guys. Let's go to you first, Tassie. Who wins and why?
Styles make fights in boxing, and the reason I picked this, I love Floyd. I'm a Floyd fan, but I mean, people saying he's the greatest ever and would beat anyone, well, they're wrong, because Styles make fights at welterweight. I think Floyd's the best at probably super fella, lightweight. At welterweight, where he has some of the most, he's a lot of bigger fights that people remember now. Tommy Hearns is bad for Floyd, stylistically. His height, his reach, his left jab. Now, Floyd was bothered by De La Hoya's jab, by Cotto's jab. Who can you say that Floyd fought compared, like he never fought a Hagler, a Duran, or a Leonard? So you can say Leonard's kind of like Floyd, but Floyd hasn't got Leonard's power. Yeah, he can box. Him and Leonard are pretty close with the boxing, speed, defence. Hearns had Leonard gone. So Floyd would have been able to chop Hearns down like Leonard did. So where Floyd adjusts in every fight, he wouldn't be able to adjust to Hearns. He wouldn't be able to have the power like Leonard did to stalk and break down Tommy inside. So, like Hagler and that did. I mean, he's got a good chin, Floyd, but I mean, Mosley had him gone, Judah had him gone. They're not Tommy Hearns. They haven't got Tommy Hearns' right hand. His jab would have bothered Floyd, the shoulder roll, the left jab would have bothered him. It would have been finding it very hard to counter Tommy with the reach. Inside, Tommy goes to the body. And as I said, he's the best fighter and the most devastating fighter that Floyd would have ever fought. I think he beats him. He stops him not early, probably stops him late. I think Floyd will probably get worn down by him. I don't think Floyd's got enough power to keep Hearns off him. And as I said, he wasn't a Ray Leonard Floyd. Who did he fight like Duran? He fought Castillo. He's a poor man's Duran. He never fought a Hagler. I think Hearns, stylistically, is the nightmare of all nightmares for Floyd Mayweather. Floyd might be okay against Duran. He might be okay against Leonard. He doesn't beat Leonard, but he might be okay. Hearns destroys him. Stops him late. He's not going to be able to deal with... He won't be able to switch into Ray Leonard and break down Hearns. All day. He gets hit from will. He'll do his best. He's a great fighter. Hearns stops him about round 8. Too much punishment.
No, fair enough, mate. Pete, what do you think?
Look, I think the fight's a lot closer than what Tassie... I mean, I'm a fan of both fighters. Obviously, Floyd's very good defensively, but the fight will start and Hearns will start to feel Floyd out. I don't think Floyd will have the power that he needs to have to actually back off Hearns. And when Hearns starts to feel that, he's going to start teeing off. And that's where the problem's going to lie for Floyd. What does he do when Tommy starts teeing off with both hands? Because he can do his shoulder rolls, can try and do his defensive stuff, but one of those bombs is going to land. And we saw when Mosley shook him up a bit, Maidana shook him up a bit, he's been shooken up. To get hit by Hearns, to hit by Mosley and Maidana, believe me, it's like getting hit by a powder puff and an atomic bomb. When he does get hit with one of them, he's going to react in a way that's going to freak him out. And that's just going to change the whole game plan. Whether then it just becomes a defensive fighter that runs and wants to survive the 12 rounds and turn it into a boring fight and try and wear Hearns down so Hearns doesn't punch himself out and just cruise to a 12-round fight. But if he does try and counter at any time and try and win the fight. I think Mayweather would get knocked out, but I think Mayweather's smarter than that. I think he'd weather the storm and he'd go the distance. And I think Tommy Hearns would win a comfortable points decision. He might have Floyd down once or twice, but Floyd's pretty tough. He'll get back up and he'll keep fighting and he'll stick to his defensive game plan. And there won't be much offense from Floyd.
Okay, so 2 for Tommy Hearns. Mike?
Yeah, look, I think that Floyd would take a few rounds to adjust to the height and the reach early. I think that, especially early in the fight, he would find Tommy a very, very difficult target to walk down, because Tommy Hearns brings a dimension that I don't think Floyd ever encountered his entire career. Maybe it was by design, because he stepped around fights with guys like Paul Williams at welterweight, who was a big guy, 6'1" guy. I just think that Floyd never really had to deal with someone that was longer and stronger than him that he needed to walk down. And one thing that makes me look at this far side Tommy Hearns is Hearns was interviewed 2 years ago and asked what he thought of the fight and how he would approach it. And I'll go over the 5 points that Hearns outlined. So his first thing was to outthink Floyd. Second was to outjab him. Third one was to force him to keep on moving his head. So it means a lot of touching, a lot of feinting in the fight. Fourth, unleash with the right hand, but only singular shots. And that's because of the 5th point, which was avoid body shots, which meant don't go to his body. Now, Tassie touched on the fact that Hearns was a tremendous body puncher. But Hearns himself acknowledges that the only chance Floyd could work into the fight is if he was able to time and get inside his shots. So throwing the body shots, which would close up his feet in range, Hearns wouldn't want to do. So if you look at stretches of the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, I think Hearns would maintain that for 12 rounds. I think just keep touching him with the jab, box, 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 move. It would only be if Emmanuel Stewart in like round 9 or 10 told him to start unleashing that he would lose his discipline. So with that said, I could see Floyd taking a few rounds, but I can't see it better than like 9-3, 8-4, Tommy, like at best for Floyd. I just, like you guys said, Floyd might historically be rated the better fighter, the greater fighter, but this is his walking nightmare. Everyone has those styles of someone who has their number, and Tommy Hearns, in my book, has his number.
Yeah, no, I can see that way. Look, I'm probably going to be the one in the group that's going to disagree. There's always one, I gather. But, look, I think I 100% agree that Hearns is Mayweather's ultimate nightmare, like he probably was for Sugar Ray Leonard. But I think just like Leonard was, I think that Mayweather's the type of fighter that would find a way. I think the first 3 or 4 rounds, Mayweather would be very, very cautious, box smart, not really engage, and I think Hearns would probably win the first 3 or 4. I think in the middle rounds, Floyd would start to find his range and up the pace a little bit. Tommy tends to then start to fade a little bit, and I just think Floyd would come home and win the last few rounds. I just think he would win wouldn't be a wide decision, but I think he would win a clear-cut decision. I think special fighters, Tassie, this is just my opinion, mate, you had yours. I just think Mayweather is the type of fighter that, like, as I said, like Sugar Ray, will just find a way, and I just think he would overcome the reach, the power. Don't forget, Floyd is almost impossible to hit. Yeah, he's been rocked a couple of times in his career, but who hasn't? All great fighters have all been rocked at one time or another, but no one got him out of there. He fought some pretty heavy punches. No one got him out of there. So I just think, yeah, as I said, that right hand would always be a danger, but I think Floyd has the tools and the reflexes and the movement and defence to negate that. And I just think, again, like Sugar Ray, I think Floyd finds a way and wins on points. So I can completely see all three of you guys the way you saw it, but I just think Floyd is something special. He's from the same mould as those great fighters like Robinson and Leonard and a few of the others. I just think he finds a way to beat Thomas Hearns, as great as he was. And I can also probably see Hearns winning, but I just, as I said, I think I would go for Floyd in a close one. So, yeah, so that's what I think. So, Tassie, I think you had, was it an 8th round knockout for Hearns, which I have no problems with. Pete was and Mike, I think both had wide decisions.
Wide. I've got Floyd going down once or twice in the fight too.
Yeah. I know it sounds strange, but I can't actually see Hearns dropping Floyd. I just think Floyd, he's got a good chin.
If Mosley can rock Floyd and he does the hula, once Hearns hits him, he's going to end up in row 6.
Yeah, he's got to hit him clean,
that's
though.
the difference.
Yeah,
and he's not. He hasn't got
hit him
Duran's
clean.
chin, mate.
Don't worry about hitting him clean. He'll hit him.
He's not Duran. He hasn't got Duran's chin. Floyd. I mean, he's not Ray Leonard. I'm a Floyd fan. I Floyd. If this was a super feather or something, be talking different. But this is at welterweight where Floyd was probably best known for. Your average boxing fan knows him at the recent fights. But I mean, I have Floyd as Pretty Boy Floyd. That's my Floyd. But I picked this fight because of the styles. I just think, as I said, it's just so much of a nightmare. I just can't say how he handles Tommy at all.
Yeah.
He adjusts better than anyone, Floyd. He's a genius.
But
I don't see how he adjusts to Tommy.
Yeah, what I will say, though, is that I think before Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns fought, I reckon you could look at both of those guys and go, how the hell is Ray Leonard or Sugar Ray going to beat this guy? He's so much taller. He's that jab. The same thing as what we're talking about with Floyd. How is Sugar Ray Leonard going to get past the jab? How's he going to actually hit him? How's he going to withstand that right hand? And he did all of that. And he found that way to... And I think a lot of these times we don't count in the thinking factor or the boxing smarts, the heart... And that's what Sugar Ray had, which overcome what... Because, as I said, I think if you put them side by side, I agree that Hearns is such a monster. You could say, how does Mayweather find a way? But I just think he's cut from the same cloth as Leonard, and he would find a way.
Oh, he definitely is cut from that cloth, 100%.
Yeah. But I have no problem with the way you guys see it either, but just my opinion.
Yeah, that was a 15-round fight, though. If they're fighting Mayweather, it's a 12-round fight.
But fighters adjust, though, Pete. Fighters adjust. It's 10 rounds, 12 rounds, 15 rounds. They adjust.
You've got to remember, Hearns would have struggled to make weight in that Leonard fight in his 6'1" frame, and going that extra few rounds.
Which means he would have struggled to make it against Mayweather as well, being welterweight.
Yeah, but only 12-round fight, a bit shorter. Yeah, he definitely wouldn't have faded, and I don't think Floyd would have done enough offensively.
Yeah.
To make
the difference
him
between Leonard and Floyd, Leonard was a puncher. Yeah, Leonard was a big puncher. Like, Floyd was never a puncher.
Floyd would have been
was Leonard a puncher?
Back. He wouldn't have...
Leonard was a puncher.
I think that's debatable, isn't it, Mike? He was actually a puncher.
He was physically strong. I know what they mean. He wasn't a singular punch knockout artist, but he was very strong. And if you think he's not a puncher, go ask Davey Boy Green.
Yeah. Well, I think most boxers have one sort of, or two highlight KOs of their career, no matter who they are. But look,
I think Leonard could punch. I think he was a very great left hook, right hand. I think he had that explosive, fast twitch power, and I mean, he hit hard enough to keep Hagler off him. He chinned Hearns. Even in the rematch, he still rocked Tommy bad in that draw. He had Tommy gone. I mean.
He also had a pretty good killer instinct too, did Leonard? They don't really get talked about too much. He had that killer instinct. When he had you hurt, he'd finish you.
Oh, he was a bad animal.
Yeah, but look, as I said, it's a really, really hard fight to pick because, as I said before, you put Leonard and Hearns together. I know it's great in hindsight to see what happened, but I think you would struggle to find a way if you put them side by side with all their attributes and size and reach and weight and all the rest of it, you would struggle to find a case for Leonard, but he found a way, and great fighters do. And I just think that's what. And Mayweather is a great fighter. And as great as Tommy is, I just don't think he's as great as what Mayweather was. Just my opinion.
Fair call. We all can't agree, mate. Otherwise, it'd be a boring show.
But the fact that we're actually discussing it and debating about it, I think it's great because I think this would have been a bit boring if we all had went, Hearns wins by unanimous decision and let's all high five and go home. It shouldn't be about that.
Right,
I'm waiting to see Mike's dream fight. I've been thinking about it, Mike.
Speaking of that, Mike, who have we got next week, mate? You're up.
I'm looking at a fight 20 years in the making, a rematch from November 17, 2001. Mario Terry versus Grant Tazzy Brown.
Daddy!
We think that Tazzy got lucky with his 30-second knockout.
Got 28 seconds.
But in all seriousness, going with what would have been a lightweight barn burner, Ray Boom Boom Mancini versus Arturo Thunder Gatti.
Ooh,
The
nice.
all-action king of the 1980s versus the all-action king of the 1990s and 2000s.
So Ray Boom Boom Mancini versus Arturo Gatti. That is guaranteed to be a war. So, geez, yeah, just when we think we can't top it, you bring this one. So that's a great one. So, well, let's discuss it next week. So for this one, 3 out of 4 went for Thomas Hearns to beat Floyd Mayweather. Really interested to hear what everyone out there has to say. We'll put another Instagram poll up so that everyone can vote on this episode, and we'll talk about that next week. So, guys, great to discuss. Really love these discussions. And I think there is no right or wrong. It's just opinions, and I think that's what's great about boxing is that we have so many different views. So, thanks again, guys, and we look forward to Boom Boom Mancini and Arturo Gatti next week.
Thanks, guys.
Good boys.
Show.